So welcome to the Rodel-Cast. This is our first one. I'm really glad to be here with Zakiyyah Ali. I'll introduce her in a minute. But this is an opportunity to talk about public education in the workforce. That's what Rodel does. We work to convene and connect folks on large-scale changes that will improve equity and excellence in public education in our workforce. And Zakiyyah Ali is the executive director of the Tech Council of Delaware. And she is an amazing entry into this space here in Delaware, and so I'm excited to have her be our first guest. And so, Zakiyyah, if you could just introduce yourself a little bit to folks, tell us a little bit about where you're from, and we'll get to what the Tech Council does in a minute, but just want to get a sense of who you are.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much, Paul. Excited to be here for Rodel's very first podcast. I was born in Atlanta, but raised in Philadelphia. I am a product of the Philadelphia school system. Yeah. A few interesting things about me that most folks might not know is that I do come from a family of entrepreneurs who were very civic-minded. Mm-hmm. I've been a basketball player since I was 10 years old and an all-star athlete in high school.
But I know most recently you were in Philly. Mm-hmm. So, give me the connection between that experience and then how you got to Philly.
Yeah, so my mom is actually from North Jersey. So a lot of times I have to slow down between saying Newark, New Jersey, which is where she's from, and Newark, which we don't live far from right now in Delaware. Yeah. But she decided to uproot herself and go to Atlanta, where she met my dad. They started a jewelry business. They relocated to Philadelphia when I was 4, so I've lived there ever since. So I consider myself a Philadelphian up until maybe about a year ago. Now I'm a Delawarean, and so Philadelphia is right up the road, but I'm happy to be here in Delaware.
You and I have talked about in the past in terms of your own background. I mean, you've been an entrepreneur for a long time. Maybe talk a little bit about some of your roots as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, my roots go back quite a bit. So I mentioned that my parents owned a jewelry manufacturing business. They were the only Black-owned jewelry manufacturing company on Jewelers Row in Philadelphia. So they had a shop at 710 Chestnut, Statements Expressive Accessories. And so while my dad didn't live long enough to see it fully come into fruition, my mom took that dream and really ran with it. I watched her hire folks right from the community, individuals that wouldn't have opportunities to connect to great, well-paying jobs, folks that didn't know how to use solder, how do you polish a piece of brass, how do you turn this raw material into beautiful earrings, necklaces, rings, and bracelets. And so she gave them a craft, but in so doing, she gave them confidence in their abilities that they could achieve something. So watching that firsthand showed me that investments in the community actually matter, and that if you take the time to teach people, educate them, and train them, so many things open up, not just for her business, but for our community.
Just as a little context, the Tech Council of Delaware was an outgrowth of the Career Pathways effort, which has gotten a lot of national recognition here in Delaware. And a couple of years ago, we collectively as a state started this search for, how do we connect the dots between what's happening with our young people and folks who are in the adult workforce with what's happening in this really expanding and robust tech community here. And we connected on this idea of creating a tech council. And we started a national search that led to finding you. And you started in January or so of last year, right?
Yep, correct.
And when you think about the tech council, just give people a sense of what it was meant to do and what you're starting to do now.
So the Tech Council of Delaware is really meant to convene employers, local companies, and businesses that have tech job openings with workforce providers who actually train our residents so that they can qualify for those jobs, and convene our community-based organizations who work really closely with residents. So creating an ecosystem of all of those three factions, including the residents and the tech professionals, so that we create pipelines of talent in the state so that employers can fill their open positions and residents have great opportunities for high quality occupations here in the state. So it's really meant to be an intermediary, bring parties together, and make our tech workforce system a lot more efficient and a lot more effective.
So when you were thinking about taking on this role, what was exciting about it for you?
Yeah, one of the things that I loved is that there was an opportunity to build new systems. A lot of times we're talking about systems in this country that need to be reformed or need to be repaired or not working in such a way that they benefit the people. And this opportunity really gave me and the team a chance to say, let's build a new system that's equitable from the start, that's inclusive from the very beginning. So the opportunity to really put the framework and operational model in place for the Tech Council, I think it's what sold me on the role.
Talk a little bit about what the current state of affairs are and what that means for Delaware. What's your take on the current landscape and what the Tech Council is trying to do in that regard?
Yep, it's interesting. So we have about 19,000 individuals working in tech in this state. And so, at first glance, some of the narratives are that, white individuals might be overrepresented and Black and brown residents are underrepresented. So one of the first things we did is to really dig into some of that data. What we found is some nuances in that. So white residents are not necessarily overrepresented in tech relative to their population. In higher wage positions and senior management positions, yes, but overall, no. What we did find is that Black and Hispanic residents are underrepresented, both men and women. But the other populations that are overrepresented are our Asian residents. And so we want to make sure that as we're thinking about what strategies would be effective, what types of programs do we want to implement, that we're using the data that's available to us and that it's accurate so that we have a clear picture of what we're working with.
Mm-hmm. And as a Black woman leading this entrepreneurial new entity, what does that look like for you as you enter this environment here?
Yeah, I would say, it looks like a lot of the other roles I've had in the past too. So, sometimes being quote unquote a minority, if you will, not one of my favorite words, but a person of color, again, not one of my favorite words, but I am a Black woman in tech. We are underrepresented, whether it's in receiving venture capital funds, whether it's in working in higher wage occupations in tech, and getting the same opportunities as other counterparts in tech. So there are certainly some headwinds against that, but I don't let any of those things slow me down. I use those things to my benefit, right? Mm-hmm. I walk with my head held high, but I know that I stand on the shoulders of other people, other Black women and Black Americans that have traversed some really difficult hardships in being the first or being one of the only folks at the table. And so I want to use that to make an impact. Representation matters. I think our young people have to see that, oh, if she can do it, so can I, and that we do qualify, we do measure up. So for me, it's all benefits and all assets. I don't let anything slow me down. Excited to be a Black woman leading tech because it's not many of us.
Well, it's actually interesting to see. You and I have talked about this. One, the student population has shifted, right? So when I got here close to 20 years ago in Delaware, the student population was about 45% students of color, and now it's about 55%. Mm-hmm. And it's going to continue moving in that direction. But in terms of the landscape of leaders, not only are you a woman of color, but the leadership at the Urban League and at Zip Code Wilmington and Code Differently have all shifted in that direction. And I think that does make a huge difference in terms of young people looking at going into this space and realizing, I do belong,
So that's an interesting way to frame it and look at it. Certainly the demographics are changing, but having had conversations with leaders of all of those organizations, one of the things strikes me right away is that we're not all the same. Right? Sure. So while we are people of color, there are some shared experiences across our respective paths to tech, but we're not a monolith. And so hearing some of the unique experiences that they've had, both in their personal lives and professional lives, really helps us to think about sharing with young people that your path is not going to be like the next person's path, right? Your personal characteristics, whether it's your race, your gender, your hair texture, your skin color, plays a role in part of what you do, but it's not everything, right? What have you done to, keep your skills fresh? What have you done to seize opportunities? How have you thought about your career and other experiences and gone after that? For each of the leaders that you've mentioned, they've taken advantage of the opportunities that have come their way, despite some of the challenges that they may have had because of their race and or gender. So it's always both and. I like unpacking those stories to see how did they overcome.
And when you think about the Tech Council 5 years from now, what would success look like for you?
Oh, that's an interesting question. In some ways, I think success would certainly look like a lot more folks at the table from the Delaware state, right? So from folks downstate, Kent and Sussex County being a lot more involved right now. We're heavily skewed towards partners and stakeholders in Newcastle County. So I'd love to see a lot more participation and involvement from some of our Delawareans downstate. But one of the things that I've kind of kept in mind and I've learned from my peers that are in the Technology Councils of North America, because the Tech Council of Delaware is part of a larger network of tech councils. And one of the things they share with us is the way you start out is not going to be how you end up.
Yeah.
And so what we're doing now is laying a really great foundation for growth, for opportunity, for future successes. So I'm excited to see where we are in 5 years. I hope that we have a lot more workforce programs in the pipeline and that we are changing some of those demographics so that Black and Hispanic residents are not underrepresented, so that they have equal opportunity and access to connect to these great jobs, and so that employers have the talent that they need to continue to grow and thrive here in the state. I want to see some of those statistics change and the narratives change, because that's what's going to make us a tech hub.
And what would it mean to be a tech hub? We talk about that, and we know that places like Boston and the Research Triangle perhaps are these tech hubs where talent is drawn. What makes a tech hub, and where are we in terms of our evolution towards that?
Presently, we don't necessarily have big tech in Delaware. Love to have big tech here, but we don't have that present day. What we do have is a great startup community, lots of small, mid-sized, and even anchor institutions that have tech job openings across healthcare, banking, fintech, advanced manufacturing, energy. And so for us, what makes us a tech hub, one, is that we have those opportunities, but two, we're doing something unique and innovative to fill those roles. And so as a small state, the fact that we can come together, create innovative opportunities like the Tech Council of Delaware, innovative strategies like the First State Tech Partnership, that we're doing things different than other tech hubs to fill those roles, to make sure our residents get connected. I think it's whatever we say we are as a tech hub, and get that out in the national stage and let people see for themselves that we are doing some great things here in Delaware.
So we're saying we're trying to get folks into tech jobs, and they're reading that Google just laid off thousands of folks. We still have growth, and JP Morgan Chase has got 10,000 employees here, but what's your take on what's happening in the tech space more broadly and how it relates to folks who are looking to get into that space here?
Yeah, so we are watching big tech lay people off kind of en masse, whether it feels to them like it's only 2% or 3% of their tech workforces or overall workforces. These are still large numbers of Americans that are losing their jobs. Even though there are Americans that may have been well compensated, there's still families and people nonetheless. So those layoffs happen, and we do watch and see that many of those individuals are able to find other tech opportunities. Likely in other sectors, it may not be big tech, but they can take the skills that they have, their credentials, their experience, and go find another job much more easily than, say, individuals that work in service or low wage occupations. And so here we do see that there are growth in tech opportunities across sectors. So energy, healthcare, advanced manufacturing as such. One of the interesting nuances that I'd like to discuss briefly is that, when we watch mass layoffs, it is easy to not see the faces and families behind, those getting laid off. That's very traumatic. On a small scale in Delaware, what the Tech Council of Delaware can do in building that ecosystem is create systems such that if an employer does have to lay off people, they now have connections with other employers to figure out how do we transition them to other jobs and occupations so it's not so shocking to the system or to the families or to our overall ecosystem, because we do care about people. So when we create those ecosystems, it's because it's relational. If we talk about that in Delaware, that relational piece should impact all of the stakeholders, not just the power brokers, not just the political insiders, but everyone connected to the tech ecosystem. So that's what we bring, is a system so that those things don't hit as hard.
Yeah, that seems like it's part of the power of that sector partnership. I
Yep.
mean, one of the things that we saw, and I know you talked about a little bit, in terms of going after some of those federal resources, you brought together not only the training providers and the employers, but nonprofit partners that could provide the wraparound supports to connect folks to the community services they need. And so in facing some kind of shifts like that, I think that's a ready set of partnerships that would enable folks to make those transitions more easily, I would think, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes folks are surprised when I say that probably the most important part of our ecosystem is actually our community-based organizations. That seems shocking because we typically default to the employers or to the training providers. But for service providers that are working directly with residents, they can more readily connect to our system and understand what we're looking for in tech. How can you better prepare residents to qualify for the training programs? How can we start to build in some foundational stability with people so that when you do get into a workforce program, you're not sidetracked with trying to figure out housing and childcare. Those are big things to address and tackle, but for as much as we can minimize some of those barriers so that people can get into the right training program, get the credentials, get the skills, and get connected to the good job, it helps to offset some of those other big things like housing, childcare, and transportation. We need our community-based organizations to be part of this system and to do some of that work with us. So we're excited to have folks like the United Way of Delaware, Goodwill of Delaware involved in that type of work.
Is there anything else that we should touch base on that we haven't hit on yet?
Well, we have a lot of these conversations all the time. I'm really interested in, from your perspective, thinking about incubating an organization like, the Tech Council of Delaware. What has been most eye-opening for you in this entire process?
Rodel has worked to incubate several different organizations, and some have been national affiliates. Like we worked with Teach for America to help get launched here. They more or less had a national infrastructure to enable that to happen. We've started some organizations from scratch, one on early childhood, one on helping charter schools get going. This has been a new venture because we had to do some national research to look at what tech councils look like elsewhere and really start this from scratch. But I have to say, I am extremely excited, and I share this with everybody I run into, about how you've approached this. I mean, you've brought a really good team into play. You've done your homework nationally, sort of built the infrastructure. You've really built relationships across, because I think what we found is that there was sort of this co-opetition going on in this state, in this pretty tight sector of technology, where when we talked to employers, they said, we can't find the talent because we're competing with our other employers. They're just folks not in the system coming up. And then when we talk to training providers, they say, well, we really don't know at scale what the employers need. And you've been able to build relationships. It's only a year, but you've been able to build relationships with folks on all sides of the issue. And I think that's going to really help create a really healthy ecosystem here. If you were to just speak a little bit about sort of what are the things that are happening right now that you're excited about?
Yeah, so one is that the Tech Council of Delaware has its official launch event on March 29th. And so we did undergo a rebranding process after having done additional research to what Rodel and some of our partners have done, listened to what our counterparts at Techna said in terms of advice and guidance on maybe how we should kind of think about forming our formal tech councils. Another great project that I'm probably most proud about is the First State Tech Partnership. That is our sectoral partnership for tech. As I said before, talking about some of the hardships and successes, it's both and for me. One of the hardships was that we did not get the Good Jobs Challenge grant. So we went after about $14 million and we were not awarded. And that's okay. What it said is that we need to put our system in place so that we can qualify for large dollar investments in the future. I'm proud to say we've done that work. So the First State Tech Partnership has designed 3 programs so far. We've designed the Certified Cybersecurity Professional Program because cyber is projected to grow about 12% over the next 5 years here in the state. We designed the Bloom Energy Advanced Manufacturing Program because advanced manufacturing is the combination of both manufacturing and tech. And we've designed the Yes We Tech summer internship program so that we have opportunities for young people, the same sorts of opportunities I had coming up, like the Young Entrepreneurs Program. And so we're excited to work with about 5 or 6 employers in Delaware to provide young people with career exposure, digital proficiency skill building, durable skills training, so that they have a great start and know that they can secure high wage employment either after high school or college. So I'm excited about all of those things.
So when is the admissions process or application process going to open up for those high school interns?
So from March 6th to March 31st, high school students that'll be rising juniors and seniors come the fall of 2023 are eligible to apply. So we have about 4 weeks. We want a lot of applications. We want to see what students are out there that are interested in an opportunity like this for themselves. It is in some ways a competitive process, as are all employment opportunities, but we will maintain a lens on diversity, equity, and inclusion for students that we know would benefit from this, that will take advantage of it, that will show up every day, and that ultimately will be working alongside us in the future. And so they can apply between, again, March 6th to the 31st. We'll assess their skills, we'll meet with them to get to know them better, and we'll launch the program on June 16th.
If I'm an employer out there looking to make a better connection in the community to talent, what are the opportunities for me?
So the opportunities are, first, to join the Tech Council of Delaware. We'll sit down and have a conversation. Our practice has been to really find out from each employer what are those tech opportunities that they're looking to fill. Nice thing about what we're doing here in Delaware for First State Tech Partnership is it is highly customized to the employer's needs, with also a heavy lens and focus on what our residents need in terms of career and employment opportunities.
And if people want to learn more information, where should they go?
So right now you can send an email to info@techcouncilofdelaware.org.
Zakiyyah, it's been a pleasure. I'm so glad that you were able to join us on this first podcast. I can't wait to see the next chapter, and excited for March 29th when you have the relaunch.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul.
Thanks, Zakiyyah.